Imagine this. You're lying in bed, the room steeped in absolute silence, when you hear a soft scraping outside the window. Not the wind, not a common animal. Something hungry, something that drains not just blood, but the essence of your sanity. This is Corvina, and today I reveal 3 forbidden tales that left me locking doors at night. Stories of cursed inheritances, silences that whisper sins, and reflections that devour souls. Stay until the end, give that like button a slurp, there it is, and subscribe so you don't miss more dark secrets like these before it's too late. I inherited my grandfather's farm in Canovanas, Puerto Rico, shortly after his death in 1996. He was a stern man, sparing with words, who spent entire nights guarding the corral with a rusty shotgun, muttering about the demon that sucks life. I laughed it off as a kid. Urban legends, my mother said, stories to scare fools. But when I arrived at that barren land, with cracked dry soil like exposed veins and a heavy air, something shifted. The sun set too early there, painting the sky a bloody red that bled into the horizon, and the animals, God, the animals seemed to know. The goats bleated softly, a constant wail echoing like the cries of lost children. I settled into the old house with creaking floorboards and shadows dancing on the walls as if alive. On the first night I heard it, a soft scraping, like nails scratching wet earth coming from the barn. My heart raced, a dull throb that drained the oppressive silence. I convinced myself it was the wind, maybe rats, but deep down, I knew. The Chupacabra had returned. The next day, I found the first victim, a young goat lying on its side in the corral, its body intact except for 2 precise puncture wounds in its neck, like marks from razor-sharp fangs. There was no blood on the ground. It was as if it had been sucked from the inside out, leaving the skin withered and pale, the eyes glassy with eternal terror. The smell was the worst, a stench of accelerated decay mixed with something sweet and rotten, like meat fermenting in the sun. I buried the animal, but that night the dreams came, visions of a crouched creature. Grey, scaly skin stretched over protruding bones, glowing red eyes like embers in the dark, licking its lips with a forked tongue. I woke up sweating, the sheets soaked, and heard the scraping again, this time closer, just below the window. I grabbed my grandfather's shotgun, the cold metal against my clammy palm, and stepped out into the yard. The moon was a pale disk, illuminating twisted shapes in the trees, and there, at the edge of the corral, something moved. It wasn't a dog or a coyote. It stood upright on 2 legs, gaunt as hunger incarnate, with dorsal spines bristling like blades. It turned its head, and I swear it smiled, a toothless grin, just bloody empty gums. The days dragged on in a haze of paranoia. I set traps, barbed wire that cut my hands as I tightened it, leaving trails of blood that seemed to attract the thing even more. More goats died. 1 per night, always the same way, drained, with expressions of frozen agony. I began to question my mind. Was this hereditary madness? I found my grandfather's yellow journal in the attic where he wrote, "It doesn't come just for the goats, it comes for weak souls, sucking what's left of humanity." He quoted an old Puerto Rican folklore book. The Chupacabra is the echo of unconfessed sins, a devourer that feeds on secrets as much as blood. Words from an anonymous author in Island Shadow Legends. I read it over and over, feeling the words etch into my skin like invisible tattoos. Neighbors whispered about the 1995 sightings when dozens of farms were ravaged, mutilated bodies scattered like offerings. One of them, an elderly man with sunken eyes, told me, "Your grandfather saw it first. He killed something, but it wasn't the right monster." The tension grew like a taut rope ready to snap. I spent nights on watch, bitter coffee burning my throat, eyes stinging with exhaustion. Sounds came from all directions, a low growl vibrating in my chest, the crack of bones breaking in the distance, the smell of sulfur mixed with the sweat of fear. One night I saw it clearly. The creature leaped over the corral, claws digging into the wood, and attacked a remaining goat. The animal screamed, a guttural, too human sound, as the monster sank its fangs, sucking with a horrific noise that echoed like water draining from a pipe. Blood sprayed in dark arcs, splattering the ground in patterns like ancient runes. I fired, the shot tearing through the air, and hit it. The thing howled, a wail that pierced my eardrums, and limped off into the forest. But when I approached the goat's body, something worse awaited. Inside its torn belly, there were no normal entrails, but a pulsating mass of black larvae, writhing as if alive on their own. The turning point came the next night. I followed dried blood trails to a hidden cave in the hills. The air inside damp and foul, like the breath of an open grave. There in the depths, I found not a creature, but my grandfather's body. Not dead as I thought, but mummified, eyes open in eternal shock, with identical marks on his neck. Had he become the Chupacabra? Or was the legend a family curse, passed down like an inheritance? A note in his hand. I killed it in '95, but it came back in me. Run before it sucks you too. It hit me like a stab. I looked at my hands and saw my nails growing sharp and an insatiable hunger rising in my stomach. It wasn't an external beast. It was me, transformed by the guilt of buried secrets. My grandfather had killed my grandmother in a fit of rage, blaming the legend to cover it up. Now, paranoia consumed me, warping my mind until I saw myself in the mirror with red eyes. I fled that farm, but at night I feel the scraping within me. I never believed in legends, but there's something about silence that makes you question everything. In 2004, I lived in a forgotten little town in rural Mexico called San Ignacio, where dirt roads seemed to swallow footsteps and the nights were so dark you could feel the void watching you. I was a freelance journalist, chasing stories to pay the bills. When I heard about the Chupacabra, locals whispered about it in hushed tones, as if saying its name aloud could summon it. "It doesn't just kill," said an old herb vendor, her eyes like they'd seen hell. "It makes you hear things you shouldn't." I laughed but took notes. The quote, she muttered, from an old Zapotec text she kept in a tattered notebook, stuck with me. The Chupacabra is not a beast. It's the silence that comes alive, a void that whispers your sins. I didn't understand, but those words clung to me like a bad smell. It started when I was called to investigate a series of cattle deaths on a farm outside town. The owner, a man named Javier, had a face etched with wrinkles like furrows of fear. He led me to the field where the cows were found, all with the same puncture wounds in their necks, bodies withered as if emptied. The air smelled of iron and rot, and the ground was covered in a dry crust that crunched under my feet. But what chilled me was the silence. Absolute, oppressive, as if the world was holding its breath. No birds sang, no insects buzzed. Even the wind seemed to avoid that place. Javier told me that the previous night he heard a sound, not a growl or a scream, but a whisper, like voices speaking in tongues he didn't understand, coming from the earth itself. He pointed to a twisted tree in the corner of the field, its roots exposed like skeletal fingers. "That's where I saw it," he said, voice trembling, eyes glowing like fire, but no body, just darkness. Drive, I decided to spend the night at the farm, with a recorder and a flashlight, thinking I could capture something for a viral article. Javier's house was an adobe shack, its walls seeming to absorb light. As night fell, the silence deepened, so thick I could hear my own blood pulsing in my ears. Around midnight, the recorder picked up something, a low hiss like static, but with rhythmic pauses, almost like words. I rewound and listened again, my stomach churning. It wasn't Spanish or any language I knew. It was guttural, broken, as if something was trying to mimic a human voice. Then came the first physical sound, a slow scraping, like claws scratching stone from outside. I turned off the flashlight, my heart pounding so loud I feared it would give me away. I looked out the window, and there it was, a hunched silhouette, with spines protruding from its back like a crown of bones. It wasn't solid. It seemed made of smoke, dissolving and reforming with each movement. Its eyes, red and glowing, stared at me, and I swear I felt a pressure in my mind, like something was digging through my thoughts. The following days were a blur of paranoia. I started hearing the whispers even during the day, always at the edge of my vision, always in silence. "You've killed," the voices said. "You've betrayed." I didn't understand. I was just a guy trying to make a living, but the voices dug up memories I'd buried, a fight with my brother that ended in an accident, guilt I never confessed. The Chupacabra, I realized, wasn't just after blood. It fed on secrets, on regrets, turning them into weapons. Ravier started acting strange, locking himself in his room, muttering to himself. One night, he showed me a drawing he'd made, a circle of strange symbols, like those I saw etched in the dirt near the dead cows. "They told me to draw this," he whispered. "They want something from me." The tension exploded on the 6th night. I woke to a scream, not human, but something that tore at the soul. I ran to Ravier's room and found him on the floor, with the same puncture wounds in his neck, but still alive, eyes wide with terror. He pointed to the ceiling, where the creature's shadow seemed to crawl, pulsing like a living ink blot. "It's you," he gurgled, blood spilling from his mouth. "You brought it." I didn't understand. But then I saw the recorder in my hand. It was on, and my own voice echoed, speaking those guttural words I swore I didn't know. It hit me like a punch. I wasn't just a witness. I was the conduit. The Chupacabra wasn't a creature I saw. It was something that used my mind, my sins, to manifest. The voices were mine, confessing things I never said aloud. I fled San Ignacio that night, burning my notes, but the whispers followed. Even now, in silence, they return, reminding me that the void never lets go. Have you ever heard the silence speak to you? Felt a weight you can't explain, as if something knows more about you than you do? Leave in the comments if you think the Chupacabra is just a legend, or if it's found you in the dark. Subscribe if you dare to hear the next story, because it might know you better than you think. I always thought the worst part of horror was the unknown. But what if the known becomes the monster? In 2012, I moved to a small village in El Salvador, fleeing a crumbling life. Divorce, job loss, the kind of hole that makes you question who you are. The village was called Chalchuapa, an ancient place with Mayan ruins whispering tales of sacrifice, where the air was thick with the smell of wet earth and rotting flowers. Locals spoke of the Chupacabra like an unwelcome neighbor, something that appeared after earthquakes or heavy rains, leaving trails of death. My new home was a simple cabin with antique mirrors on the walls that reflected distorted shapes under the dim candlelight. I didn't know then, but those mirrors would be my downfall. An elderly woman from the village, with trembling hands like dry leaves, warned me, "Don't look at the reflection at night. It sees you back." She quoted an old Salvadoran legend, supposedly recorded on a scroll she claimed was real. The Chupacabra doesn't hunt in the dark. It waits in the mirror, hungry for what you hide from yourself. Words attributed to an anonymous shaman in Chronicles of Eternal Shadows. The first few weeks were peaceful, or so I pretended. I worked in a small orchard, picking fruit that dripped red juice like blood, but at night the sounds began. A low hiss, like heavy breathing behind a door, followed by the scraping of claws on wood. I chalked it up to exhaustion, the loneliness eating away at my mind like acid. Then came the first death. My dog, a stray I'd adopted in the village, found in the yard with its neck punctured, body limp and empty, its eyes reflecting a strange glow, even in death. The smell was nauseating, metallic, mixed with something sour like curdled milk. I buried the animal under a tree. But that night, as I looked in the bathroom mirror, something flickered. Not my eyes, but a pair of red ones behind me, vanishing when I turned. My heart raced, an erratic drum in my chest, and I shattered the mirror, the shards cutting my skin, leaving drops of blood that seemed to attract more shadows. Paranoia settled in like an unwelcome guest. I started avoiding reflections, covering windows with black cloth, avoiding puddles that gleamed like accusing eyes. But the sounds persisted. Whispers now, murmuring names, the name of my ex-wife, the screams of our unborn child lost to my selfish choices. I heard dripping, like blood leaking from invisible wounds, and the air grew cold, condensing into puffs that danced before me. One night, after a storm that rattled the cabin like shaking bones, I found marks on the door, deep scratches, as if something was trying to get in, and footprints, not animal, but hybrid, with claws and elongated fingers. I went out with a knife, the metal trembling in my sweaty hand, and followed the trail to a clearing in the Mayan ruins. There, under a full moon that tinted everything a sickly silver, I saw the creature, scaly skin stretched over a skeletal frame, dorsal spines like rusted blades, and a mouth that opened in an endless yawn, revealing dripping fangs. It was feeding on a rabbit, sucking with a wet, repulsive sound, the animal's body visibly withering. But the real horror came when it raised its head and looked at me, not with a beast's eyes, but with mine, filled with a hunger I recognized. I ran back, locking myself in the cabin, but the mirrors I hadn't managed to cover all began to show things. In the reflection, I saw not my face, but hers, merged with mine, as if we were fusing. The whispers became internal voices. You've always been hungry, always drained the life from others. I remembered past incidents, friends betrayed by ambition, a family destroyed by my cowardice. The Chupacabra wasn't external. It was a distorted reflection of my soul, manifesting through the guilt I carried like a plague. The tension culminated in a night of madness. I locked myself in the room, but the scraping came from within, from me. My body ached, bones cracking as if rearranging, and an insatiable thirst burned in my throat. I looked at the last intact mirror and saw the transformation, my skin scaling, eyes reddening, fangs sprouting. It devoured me alive. I was the Chupacabra all along, a psychological curse triggered by the legend, or perhaps something supernatural that possessed broken souls. The deaths weren't random. They were projections of my mind, killing what I loved to feed the inner void. I shattered the final mirror, shards flying like bloody confetti, and fled the village, but the reflection follows me in every glass, every shadow. Sometimes at night, I feel the fangs itching, and I wonder if the next victim will be myself. And there you have it, 3 tales that left my blood cold, making me question if the Chupacabra is just a legend, or something lurking within our own shadows, waiting for the right moment to suck what's left of our sanity. It doesn't kill quickly. It makes you feel empty first, as if your soul is being drained drop by drop, until you beg for the end. Don't miss the next video, because the terror is just beginning, and it might be too late if you blink. Hit the like button if this gave you chills, comment Chupacabra if you feel something watching you now, and subscribe to the channel to stay out of the dark, literally. Until next time, if you survive the night.